My name is Andrej van Wirdum. I'm the author of the Genesis book, and I'm joined on stage by Bruce Fenton on the right, or your left, Obi Nwosu, I'm saying it right? And Andrej Majcen. So for those that don't, there might be people in the room that don't quite know this, but in the 90s there was a group of activists and hackers, programmers, cryptographers, and they foresaw sort of the potential of the internet, but they also saw the potential risks of the internet as something that could evolve into something of a sort of digital panopticon, where everything anyone does online can be traced and tracked and analyzed and potentially used against you. What they set out to was to sort of prevent that future by building tools, code that gave people the opportunity to reclaim their privacy. And as part of their efforts, they really wanted to create a form of digital cash. And Bitcoin, Satoshi kind of took technologies that were developed by these cypherpunks and sort of put them together to create Bitcoin. Now fast forward to today, and today people are, the sort of dominant narrative is about institutional adoption, nation state adoption even, treasury companies. So the question we're going to be discussing on this panel is how much of the original cypherpunk values are still alive in Bitcoin today, and how important is that? Okay, I already mentioned you by name, but let's start with a short introductory round. Bruce, do you want to tell everyone who you are?
Sure, I'm Bruce Fenton. I started in TradFi a long time ago, and then I got into this space about full-time by 2013, and we host the Satoshi Roundtable event, and I've done some investing and other stuff in this space, and consider myself a cypherpunk.
Yeah, my name's Obi Nwosu. Again, similarly, I got into the space as a company on an official basis in 2013. I ran a Bitcoin exchange in the UK. It went on to become the UK's longest running Bitcoin exchange. But sold that approaching 4.5 years ago now because I saw a need to make it easy for people to get off exchanges and be able to take control of their own money, their own communication. And I set up Fedi with a number of investors in the Bitcoin space, and we make a private Bitcoin wallet. So it acts like any other wallet that you expect, but you get perfect, cryptographic perfect privacy using a protocol called Fedi, which is based on eCash, which is the protocol that precedes Bitcoin by 25 years. It provides perfect privacy, but it had a flaw. It required a trusted intermediary, and it was based on USD, on fiat. Now we base it on Bitcoin as the base protocol, but you have the privacy and scalability on top.
Andrej.
My name is Andrej Majcen. I'm a co-founder of Bitcoin Suisse, which is like the oldest and largest crypto financial intermediary in Switzerland. We also started 2013, myself more or less coming directly from university. We had the idea to make crypto accessible to everyone, and that's also then how we started our business back in the days, and ever since we have been advocating for like adoption of crypto and Bitcoin, of course, in particular.
Right. Yeah, so I mentioned cypherpunk values. So what that means, things like privacy, censorship resistance, very strong anti-government ethos, right? Self-sovereignty. To what extent are these values still alive and important today in Bitcoin? Let's start with you, Andrej. What's your view on that?
I mean, it's a good question, and I think the underlying technology, of course, represents all those different values and has it, as part of its technology. Of course, what we're seeing nowadays is some sort of a trend where we take this beautiful, young, still fairly young kind of technology and innovation and try to wrap it into as many layers of TradFi as possible, right? And this is a little bit what we currently consider as institutional adoption. That goes, of course, in a different direction than the original kind of ethos that the whole industry was standing for. But on the other side of things, I think it can like coexist, because one thing is the technology layer and the other one is like what institutions are doing with it, and yeah, one doesn't necessarily contradict the other, so that's my point of view.
Okay, Obi, one doesn't contradict the other, do you agree?
No, I agree that they don't contradict each other, but I think we need to work out on levels here. Bitcoin only exists because of the cypherpunks. It's not the other way around. And if you lose the cypherpunk ethos, you lose Bitcoin, and everything else that's built on top of it, where many people are generating a lot of value, will also crumble. So if we look at the Cypherpunks manifesto, it's very interesting. Most people take away this statement, cypherpunks write code. And a lot of people think that cypherpunks are just coders and so on as a result. In fact, if you actually analyze the manifesto, the word code and writing code was only mentioned 3 times in this manifesto. Privacy was mentioned 22 times. And it was never mentioned self-custody, and it didn't mention self-sovereignty and censorship resistance. These are implicit requirements, but the key thing was private is key. And even the first line is that privacy is necessary for an open society in the digital age. They had incredible foresight. They understood that this is absolutely essential. If you lose that with Bitcoin, then it's actually worse than the existing system. It goes from being this incredible freedom technology to being panopticoin, 1984 coin. I would prefer the existing system over that. So you must make sure that whatever happens, we maintain these ideals. Even Eric Hughes, the writer of the manifesto, 3 years later, when asked about the writing code part, clarified that actually I want to clarify that. Unless you have privacy and it's accepted in society, writing code isn't enough. So yes, it's essential, and everything on top is great, it adds value, but they're a multiplier, while privacy is an additive. 0 multiplied by infinity from treasuries and so on is still 0. You need something there already, and that's a privacy-preserving token.
Bruce, how do you see the tension between institutional adoption and the original cypherpunk values? Are they in conflict?
Yeah, they are in some ways. I'm not a huge hater of the institutions. I wasn't a huge hater of altcoins. These are just kind of altcoins. You know, people go make their money, go do your thing, but it's not Bitcoin. You know, an ETF is not Bitcoin. And these centralized projects, you're not getting the core values of Bitcoin, the control, the censorship resistance, in some cases privacy. You're putting it in a centralized wrapper, and if you put it in a centralized wrapper, you lose everything that's good about it. And it's not Bitcoin. It's just it's an affinity marketing thing. It's hey, you like Bitcoin, go buy my other project. You know, just like hey, you like Bitcoin, go buy my altcoin. It's not the same thing, and I think in many ways it's a step backwards. Like I say, I don't hate these people, but they certainly shouldn't be celebrated. It's not forwarding our industry. If we do treasury strategies, we do ETFs, we cheer for BlackRock and Cantor. That's a step backwards. It's not something to be cheerful for. It's not a victory, in my opinion. A victory is having more people have direct ownership of real Bitcoin. We now have millions of people who've been onboarded into this fake paper thing that's a claim on a claim on a claim of something that has Bitcoin in the words, but it's not actually Bitcoin. And they're never actually holding a wallet like many of us did back in 2012, where somebody sent us that first $1 and you say, wow, this is cool. I didn't need to give my ID, and I'm able to control and hold this money for the first time. You now have a whole generation of millions of people that they don't have that. They have some, junk fiat products sitting like sludge on their centralized brokerage account at the centralized clearing firm, traded on a centralized exchange with a centralized transfer agent and a centralized custodian, and they have to trust 6 levels of people on a claim for something that has Bitcoin in the word. It's not a victory. It's not a step forward. I don't think it's something that should be celebrated at all.
Obi, I want to dig into something you just said a little bit, and maybe you touched on it, but so there's, on the one hand, you can make sort of an ideological argument about why we should care about privacy, why that is important, why that's an important property of Bitcoin, from an ideological level. But I'm just sort of gonna riff here, and I'll let you guys respond. Like, can Bitcoin even work if it doesn't have these cypherpunk properties? Because I think these are also what makes Bitcoin unique. These are some of the, the unique value proposition. It's like the censorship resistant and level of privacy is something that actually makes Bitcoin useful. So it's good that it's scarce, but it also needs to be useful, I think. So if you lose that, I don't know if Bitcoin can even succeed at all. Who wants to? Let's start with you.
I think Bitcoin can work without privacy.
What's that?
Bitcoin can work without privacy. The problem is that what you've effectively done is created effectively it's got a name already. We call them CBDCs.
Right, but Obi, why wouldn't people then just use the CBDC?
Well,
like,
it's just a CBDC without people realizing. The reason why is because when you create CBDCs, all votes tend to suggest that people don't want them. And so this could be a very clever way to get people to adopt a CBDC without them realizing they adopt a CBDC. The same thing happened with the Federal Reserve in the US. Multiple attempts were made to have all these independent banks around the world, around the country, cede their power to a centralized bank. And every time that was attempted, the US citizens said, why would I do that? So eventually they got them to do it by suggesting that there was a war and this was needed to fund the war to protect the great United States. And then they finally, after multiple attempts, got the people of the US to agree to the central bank being set up. So the same will happen with Bitcoin. If you lose privacy, you lose the thing that made it very significant. It will still work, but you've just gone out of the frying pan. You have this potential, incredible future, but then you've just had a bait and switch, and you're into the fire of exactly the same system, but without realizing that you are. So it can work, but the existing system sort of works as well. But we're looking for something greater. We're looking for something better. We have an opportunity of a lifetime, and so we should make sure we stick with it and make it happen. And for that, privacy is key. Private is key.
Okay, Andrej, what do you think is the best, or do you want to respond to this?
Because no, I probably would even go beyond just like the privacy argument to answer your question.
Yeah.
I mean, the inherent value at the end of the day of Bitcoin is not just like the scarcity, but of course everything that you just like described, right? It's a decentralized system that gives actually power to the people away from centralized systems. Privacy is of course an important element from it, but
essential.
I mean, it's very essential for sure. But on the other side of things, you can be like your own bank. You can, I mean, the networks work in itself, right? You don't depend really on any kind of third party. On the other side of things, the reality is still out there, and that's probably one of the critics to the whole industry, is that a lot of the adoption nowadays is happening through centralized kind of institutions, right? Because not everybody directly wants to interact with like the blockchain itself, because I mean, usability improved a lot throughout the years, but I mean, it's still like a long way to go in order to make it more accessible to like everyone, right? So, and there, of course, the centralized platforms, including like what BlackRock has been doing and the ETFs and so on, have fulfilled some sort of a role, but of course it's very absurd to like have something that is tradable 24/7 and put it into like a TradFi product that is available during bank opening hours, right? And I think there we have quite some improvements still ahead of us. But of course the technology in itself, I mean, that's, the value goes beyond the scarcity of just Bitcoin.
I wonder what Bruce would think about that, because is it really adoption if it's not even related to Bitcoin Rails in any way?
Yeah, I don't think it's adoption. I don't think it counts if we do this. And if we strip out the decentralization and we make this asset centralized, or we put it under centralized wrappers where 50, 60% and deca millions of users are just using a centralized wrapper where we've stripped out the privacy, we've stripped out the decentralization, then we're really left with nothing. We're left with a store of value-ish, and all due respect to the gentleman, Mr. Saylor, a store of value is very boring if you don't have the underlying technology. It's a beanie baby. It's a tulip. It's all of the things they used to make fun of back in the early days. And the way that we would counter that is we say, no, this is not a tulip. This is a new invention. It's a invention that is decentralized, that is not controlled by anybody. But if you have it all controlled by BlackRock, then you lose that narrative. And you're not really onboarding. And it's important, I think it's very key for our industry right now as we're looking at this, because as we move forward, there's this idea that we're going, BlackRock is going to onboard 20 million people, and then all of a sudden at some magic day in the future, 5 years, 10 years from now, they're just going to suddenly move over and come over to private wallets and start holding their own keys. I don't think that's the case. I think we've already lost some of the technology that we had when we started. Local Bitcoins is gone. Many of the wallets are gone. People are paying for things less. Where I live in New Hampshire, everybody used to pay with Bitcoin. Satoshi Roundtable 1 was 100% Bitcoin payments. Now it's almost zero. People are using it less. And if you build this fake artificial system around this artificial narrative that's all centralized by banks who are frankly evil actors in many cases, then you're not building that other infrastructure. You're wasting the time that could be building to make self-custody easier, to make payments easier. If you want to lobby governments and work with governments, you could say, let's get rid of the taxes. Let's get rid of the AML KYC requirements. Let's make this frictionless rather than trying to get governments to put more centralized control. I just think it's not a victory. I don't think it's real onboarding, and I think it runs a risk. At best, you end up with everything that would make this money work as money like it's supposed to and have self-sovereignty gets replaced by centralized actors, and one industry rises and all of their legacy and they use their lobbying power. There's countries right now that say if you hold Bitcoin, it must be in an exchange. Next it's going to be if you hold Bitcoin, it must be in an ETF. And these powers rise, and all of those entrepreneurs who would have been doing cool things, cypherpunk things, fall by the wayside. And that's best case scenario. Worst case scenario is they end up with 60% of the Bitcoin, and then they decide they're going to do some stupid AML KYC BlackRock fork, and they say this is the real Bitcoin, and if you don't, we're going to dump everything on the open market, and they co-opt developers, and they make a fork of it, and a few of us shout from our very, very small voices, and the industry goes, and the masses, all of these 20 million people who are in there say, oh no, don't talk about that terrorism coin, the original Bitcoin, that's not what we want. We need the AML KYC, or BlackRock and Saylor are going to dump it, and then the value is going to go way down. And we don't want that. We don't want that centralization. It's not a victory. It's not what we're here for. We're here to replace these guys. We don't need them. They came to this kicking and screaming after a decade of making fun of us. They're not here because they liked this. They're here because they came and we beat them year after year after year after year for a decade. We said, we have the best performing asset in the last 100 years and you're not allowing people to do it. They didn't come here for cypherpunk values. They came here to grift and make a buck. They don't care about our values. They're not a victory. They need us more than we need them. Personally, I recommend that everybody tell them to go pound sand and go and take self-custody and self-sovereignty and replace them, grind them into the dust. That's what we were supposed to do with this industry.
Yeah, I mean, so you said something, if you strip out the sort of cypherpunk values, then Bitcoin does become the digital beanie baby or the digital tulip that the critics 10 years ago said it was, and they were, yeah, that's exactly what I also think. So what is, now that we've established that this matters, what is the best way to actually save this, further this? Is it just technology, or are there other ways that we can sort of protect, defend, champion cypherpunk values? Andrej?
I think usability is one of them. So, I mean, in the early days when we started, I mean, it improved a lot, every kind of wallet and so on, and interactions, but still, I mean, all of us in here in this room, I mean, we're like the insiders in the industry. It's still like 0.3% of global wealth that is like in crypto, which is still, I mean, it's peanuts, right? It's super small. So we have quite a long journey still ahead of us, and then you can compare it with, let's say, the market cap of gold or like global bonds and so on. The good thing is, I mean, obviously centralized systems, they have a lot of deficiencies, right? So I don't think that Bitcoin needs to solve every problem. The other side of the chain is going in the wrong direction anyway. So I think we will have an easier game in the future, but of course we also need to improve in the industry, and the industry has been full of also like bad actors as well, like all the scams and meme coins and altcoins and whatnot, which is also like diluting the attention of the industry just for like let's get rich quick and all those kind of schemes. It's also wasting the resources that could be allocated into actually developing the technology in a direction where it makes sense to like really improve usability of the technology, to do education as well and so on, try to embrace more people to join the ecosystem for what it really stands for. And at the end of the day, it should be like decentralized, right? The power should be with the people and not centralized institutions. And at one point, you have like a huge kind of bulk risk when Saylor holds like 3.whatever% of Bitcoin, same with BlackRock and so on. So this centralization is, of course, going in the wrong kind of direction, but I think you can only break it by embracing more people to directly interact with the blockchain, and usability is key. But if like the average person out there is scared to like do a Bitcoin or like a crypto transaction in general because something could go wrong, or their neighbor got scammed with some sort of a weirdo platform and all of those things, they don't know how to handle, I don't know, forks, airdrops, and all the like the gimmicks of the industry, right? It needs a lot of education, but you also need to embrace like new people to use and interact with the blockchain directly and decentralize it again.
I mean, the reason Fedi was set up was to give privacy to as many people as possible, as easily as possible. And so the answer to the question is, it's two parts. One is you need to make the user experience so easy that privacy is invisible. Because even though privacy is key, there's this thing called the privacy paradox. When you interview someone directly and ask, do you want privacy? Do you want people to see you going to the toilet? Do you want people? Most people say, yes, I want privacy. It's very clear. But when you actually look at their actual behavior, people will easily and frequently give up privacy for convenience. And this is called the privacy paradox. So the answer is you have to meet people where they are, and you have to make it so that privacy is there by default. It's like the medicine that the kid needs, but you don't want to just explain medicine to them. You just mix it in with the sweet. And the actual experience has to be as good, and ideally way better. You use privacy in your user experience to make the experience way better than the alternative. And so we spent several years and with various UX professionals to try and do that. The other thing is you have to meet people where they are, and you start with the people who right now, today, understand the need for privacy, because they're sort of living in the future, and provide them a solution. So we work with various people around the world. We operate in multiple countries, but a lot of the stuff we do is people who are living under the yoke of authoritarian regimes. So if you're in an authoritarian regime and you're a journalist, or you're someone who's in opposition government or to that regime in Latin America or Africa, then it may be that if you don't have privacy, you're someone who's thirsty. If you're thirsty, you know what water looks like. And if you don't, in those cases, not having privacy can land you in jail, tortured, or even killed. So they very quickly understand the need for privacy, and they give us incredible feedback, and that's what over the last few years allowed us to build this product. And we've helped people who were dissidents escape countries where if they use the banking system, it'll be traced. And it's not just, by the way, if you fix money and privacy there, it's not enough. You have to fix communication and privacy. You have to fix accessing the internet and privacy. All in one simple to use package, which is operationally and experientially simpler to use than the alternatives. And that's the approach. So we have people on the ground, in country or where it's not possible, near country as well, working with the people on the ground, plus we build the product based on the requirements as well.
Bruce, I want to ask you a more specific question because you're the politician on stage. and in the US, right? So what we're seeing in the US, I think very clearly, is that on the one hand, Bitcoin is sort of being embraced by, the powers that be, or the president, Trump, for example. On the other hand, we see Bitcoin developers and privacy developers specifically actually going to jail. So there seems to be a very parallel or contradictory thing going on where they embrace one part of Bitcoin, but really actively fight still the cypherpunk side of Bitcoin. How important do you think it is that governments, politicians also embrace this part of Bitcoin? Or is, speaking as a cypherpunk, should that just not even enter the equation? Doesn't matter because it's supposed to be anti-government anyways.
The only interaction that we should have with governments in any way is not lobbying them to buy Bitcoin, not lobbying them to do treasury strategies or support this or that, or issue their own coins or get regulatory clarity. The only interaction we should have with them is to say, please get out of the way. And if you don't get out of the way, we're going to build things that make it so you can't get in the way. Because we don't need them, and it's immoral. The job of government, and most governments fail miserably at this, the job of government is to protect people's life, liberty, and property. Most of them can't even do that. They can't stay out of wars. They can't keep their own budgets in place. They can't keep their people safe. They really don't have any business or authority or anything else, and they certainly don't have the moral authority to go after people who write down words and numbers that they don't like. It's completely immoral. It's completely unethical. They have no moral right to do it. All of these laws should be scrapped. AML KYC is a very new and very stupid thing that was created in my career. I'm not that old, but in my career in the United States, when I started as a financial advisor, you could buy a stock without an ID, and you had a week to pay. And when they first did it, the older brokers were like, they couldn't believe it. They said, what are you going to need an ID to buy shoes and lettuce? And now, like a frog in boiling water, an entire generation thinks this is some sort of birthright of government. It's not. It's ridiculous. It's immoral. It's unethical. It's backed by violence. It has no place in a civilized society. If you're a government and you're demanding that developers follow any rules, you're a thug. You're a thug, and you're doing something that is immoral and wrong and violent because you're backing it with violence. You're basically saying, if you write down words and numbers that I don't like, I'm going to have somebody point a gun in your face and put you in a cage. Well, you don't have that authority. And I would prefer if everybody in our industry ignored government and didn't talk to them. In every case, from the ridiculous bit license in New York all the way through to things that are just happening now, we have well-meaning Bitcoiners who go out to government and say, oh, please give us regulatory clarity, and they bite you. It's like the old parable of the scorpion. It's in the nature of government. Nothing against any particular politician. The nature of the beast is to sting you. You're playing with rattlesnakes when you play with government, and you should not have them have any involvement whatsoever in this. So that's what I would say. I would say, please get out of the way. Let people peacefully interact. Just like every single one of our ancestors going back since the beginning of time, none of them had AML KYC. Do you realize this? Every ancestor we have is sitting laughing at us saying, why do you need to have your ID when you trade? That's a very new and very stupid idea. And I'm sorry that my country has pushed that out on every other country in the world and said, we're going to hit you with a stick if you don't have this gray list. And we treat 2 billion people on Earth as if they were all criminals. And you have to ask and get permission and present an ID if you want to buy a motorcycle on the internet. It's preposterous, it's ridiculous, it belongs in the dustbin of history, it has no place in a civilized society. And if they won't do it voluntarily, we should make technology that makes it so that they can't do us. Because all of the tanks and guns in the world can't stop math and code. And that's the beauty of this technology. No matter how tyrannical a government is, no matter how much they want to interfere, they can't break math, they can't break physics, they can't break the reality of code and the reality of these laws. And hopefully we can make a system that makes it so it's government-proof. We don't need them, they don't add, they don't help. We're better off without them, and we build a more peaceful world.
Okay, we have about 2 minutes left. Maybe Obi, do you agree? How should Bitcoiners interface with the government, if at all? What's your view on that?
I think, I mean, I spent time doing that when I was running a regulated exchange. I had an afro when I started, and now I'm bald as a result of that. So it's incredibly stressful. Some people make progress, and everybody is going to choose their own path in how they add value. So I'm horses for courses, but my personal view is that you have to make sure the foundations are in line with cypherpunk values. Bring it back to the original question. It has to be something that is, this is something so essential it needs to be like water or like air. And so it needs to, and we're working on making that happen. There are a few other people in the space working on making it happen, but way too few. And I hope that more people look at doing this.
Andrej, final words for you.
Quick one. I mean, on the other side, I fully agree, by the way, with what has been said previously. But of course, the reality is as well that it's not always that easy. So if you want to build up a business, if you want to pay salaries to your employees and so on, and then on the other side is the regulator that threatens you to be thrown into jail or kill your company or so on. I mean, either you comply with that and you survive and continue building your business, or you play the mad guy and then you face the consequences. So that's where I don't see it that radical. So I think you need to find ways to work together with regulators on reasonable regulation, because that can be reasonable, but the risk that is being over-regulated is extremely high, and in most jurisdictions that's exactly the case. So yeah, I think we're over.
All right. Well, that's our time. Please, everyone, give a hand for Bruce, Obi, and Andrej.
Thank you.
And see you all tomorrow.